Greetings, everyone. I am so glad to be with you today for our first TRG 30 in July, and at TRG 30, as always, we are listening to you and working to inspire your bold action and thinking about our resilience in this sector. Today, we're going to be talking about all of those things: boldness and innovation and resilience for certain, with my guest, Kwame Kwei-Armah, who is an actor and playwright and broadcaster and the artistic director of the Young Vic in London, in England. For those of you who are and may not be familiar with Kwame, prior to being installed at the Young Vic, he spent several years, 7 in fact, as artistic director at Baltimore Center Stage in America. And prior to that, he was the artistic director for the Festival of Black Arts and Culture in Senegal. There were plenty of impressive awards and accolades along the way, including a 2012 OBE for services in drama. And for those of us outside of England, you should know that this is among the highest honors to be bestowed, given for exceptional achievement in an activity. Sir Kwame Armah, welcome to TRG 30. You are so, I'm so pleased to have you here, and you have invited me to call you Kwame rather than Sir today, but I am so pleased to have you with us. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. No sir necessary.
So for today's conversation, we're going to talk in 3 time frames. We're going to talk about the right now, the near future, and the future, capital F, future. But to get us started with the right now, and we'll get to the future here in a minute, the context for the right now is this, as I see it. The Young Vic began in the 70s. As an offshoot of the Old Vic, which was the first site of the National Theatre, very prestigious. But the Young Vic was designed to be the people's theater, in the community, for the community. And your website actually describes the theater being originally conceived as a paperback theater, where high quality work would be made available at low cost. And as I read that, I thought, boy, oh boy, that kind of origination story is as important now as it has ever been. I know you agree. So could we start by your describing in the right now, and this is a very particular time of right now, can you describe how you're doing that community connection, that kind of work at the Young Vic?
Yes. Well, it's joyous to be here, so thank you for inviting. And as I think I may have said when we spoke before, when I landed at the Young Vic and I saw that we used your software, I was overjoyed. Because I went, oh, I know it. It's great.
Yes, we knew each other then back in Baltimore, I think.
Absolutely, absolutely we did. And I would say you're absolutely right. Speaking to the specific here and now is very different to what I would have said 3 months ago. I would say right now, the way that we're carrying that mission forward is that one of the charities that we work with delivers food to the needy in our borough. And we do that as well right now. I've realized that I'm so pleased that I work in the arts, because Deliveroo would probably have fired me, or Uber Eats, really quickly, because it takes me about 6 hours to do like 4 meals in the area. But me and other members of staff are doing that. We also, our taking part to the apartment is still working, though digitally, with many people in the area, from learning how to write plays, to learning how to talk about theatre. And also our directors program is weekly serving up to 1,000 young people in the area, taking them through being an artist at this precise moment. So we're doing a lot of activity, as I said, from delivering food to the needy to creating virtual town halls for the sector. It's an important part of who we are. But I would finally say that in better days, or in days pre-COVID, 10% of our tickets are given away for free, not a £10 or £15, but for free. And that's really important because it serves us. This isn't just some kind of Victorian philanthropy, that our audience come in and they see these people who traditionally might not have come to our space had they not been invited in via these free tickets. And they feel better. They feel that they're in the London that they live in. They feel that there's a cross-section of demographics. And I don't just mean racially, but in age-wise and gender-wise as well. And so it serves us to actually make sure that our theatre is open to those who might traditionally not choose to come to theatre.
Kwame, several weeks ago, I introduced 7 ways that we at TRG can see the sector needing to behave boldly and with conviction, so that when we come out on the other end of this recovery, we are as relevant and connected as possible. And this business model that you're describing at the Young Vic is able to ensure that the Young Vic continues to be in relationship with its community. That it feels so important. And so now if we pivot for a moment from the right now to the near future, let's think 12 to 18 months. The last time you and I spoke, which was more than a month ago, and a lot has happened in a month's time. Not only DCMS guidance, but also national investment in arts and culture. But when we talked a month ago, you were doing what everyone is doing, which is lots of scenario planning with ideas about agility and nimbleness. So as you look at the next 12 to 18 months for the Young Vic and think about those things you've just described, plus, what's the priority? What's the plan for the Young Vic right now?
Well, thank you. You framed it up really well, because we have been scenario planning on sand. And though we have the announcement for the government for the 1.5 billion financial settlement or package, which is most welcome, as we stand today, here and now, we don't yet have the details of that. And so we don't quite know when those funds will arrive. And we also, as individual theatres, don't quite know how much we will get. So though we know that there is light at the end of the tunnel, we are still amid the tunnel. And so actually planning becomes quite hard. Here's what I do know, is that whatever happens, the moment that we get the go-ahead from Public Health England to allow people back in our theatre, we will be experimenting with audiences, shows, social distance, non-social distance if we get the go-ahead, interior, exterior, balcony. We will be experimenting in order to just see and test the hypothesis that people actually want to come back into our space. One of the things we're going to do, I'm really excited about. In the meantime, we're going to have an art exhibition and an installation on the outside of our building that speaks to this particular moment in time where statues are being pulled down in Britain and across the world. And we're going to have that related and juxtaposed against celebrating 50 years, and we'll be 50 in September, and quite how those two external installations interact with each other, and what that does for the street, what that does for the environment, how that helps our freelancers to work, how it helps our actors to dance with those installations. So right now, we're thinking very much about the next 4 months, about how we're going to animate the building until we get public health authorities, the public health to say, yes, you can bring audiences back. And then we're thinking about what kind of work we need to do to say to audiences, come back in and play. And that's the first part. And let me just answer very quickly, and forgive me, the back end of 18 months. I think, again, it's tremendously difficult to think about, programming. But what we do know is that we have a magnificent board here at the Young Vic who are fiscally very responsible, but saying to Despina and I, dream, continue to dream, continue to innovate.
Mm.
And what the triple threat to our mortality, which has been the financial precariousness of we find ourselves in the sector, white supremacy as being negotiated with through Black Lives Matter, and COVID-19, triple threats to our mortality. What that means to us is actually, it's been very interesting for me. I've literally just got off a board call where I feel empowered and inspired to stand in my truth, to not shadow box with the world in possibly the way that I may have done before, but standing my truth as a Black male running an institution that isn't ethnically specific, and actually not run and hide or duck and dive away from a celebration of Black postmodernism, in that we can do everything and do everything, and we will invent and play with form and twist form and be traditional. That right now is the time that I can stand in my power. And that power is innovation. That power is adaptation. That power is speaking truth to myself.
Oh, man. I was so looking forward to this conversation. And right now I am reminded about why. That is inspiring. And in fact, as we move from this massive vision that you've just described, I mean, you have people around you who are inspiring you. I'm so grateful for that. And so all of those cylinders are charging, it sounds like, around you, which is...
From my board, to my artistic team, to the staff, to my ED, I feel very inspired and fired up by the support that they're giving us to dream.
Yeah, sure everyone can feel that. So let's in fact go to another reason I was looking forward to talking to you, and that's about the future. So, okay, we've talked 12, 18 months, and there's a lot to accomplish there. But you also think about the future with a capital F, which inspires me too greatly. And I was reminded that you were the chancellor at the University of Arts in London, and that kind of curriculum, I can even hear it interplaying in the kinds of things you're thinking about in the near future. But you know, there your students are studying interactive film and computer animation, all kinds of things that I can imagine inspired you as you think about how technology might walk alongside the traditional performing arts that we operate within, and how it might expand who we connect with and how. And I would love to hear what you're thinking now about that kind of future and what it might even mean for today.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tremendously fascinating subject. And I think when I became artistic director of Baltimore Center Stage, again, a brilliant theater, and I had brilliant support around me, that I began to play with what I then described as theatrical byproducts. The digital world, how to make films. We made rapid response theater around Black Lives Matter. We took plays out onto the street in Baltimore during the uprisings. We brought robots into the theater so that people in Johns Hopkins Hospital could actually be part of the theatrical experience. And those robots would tour the building and would sit in and would be placed in a seat almost. And the person at the other end with the joystick could look to the left, could look to the right, and could span the whole environment. And that became really important to me. Why? Because actually many of the people that I grew up with and that I loved was in Britain, and I was in America, and I wanted them to know what I was doing in real time. I wanted to interact in real time. And I think that also, I think about that a lot now here at the YV. I'm thinking about XR. I'm thinking about the world that lockdown has taught us, has brought us to. A world where at exactly the same time we are being, we were forced to, rather correctly, to be quite insular and be in our homes, while conversely, seeing the world through the internet in a way, in an accelerated fashion. And I think how we dance in theater with what I will call the internet, what is being called the Internet of Things, is going to make the difference between access or non-access. Now, there are many people who are at the moment creating a theatrical project, and then they're going and they're recording it and then putting it on Netflix. And I think that's one way of doing things. But I'm really interested now in integrating the camera into rehearsals, pre-rehearsals, and performance, and how people can access our work from wherever they are in the world by buying those seats. And you'll hear the connection between the robot experiment that we did at Baltimore, and now knowing that we'll never be able to create work and not record it in some way again. And so I'm very fascinated with how XR and performance, as both integrated on the stage and as a separate byproduct, will coalesce and make itself manifest in the next 5 years.
I think about the aging boomer population even, and how those kind of technologies can extend the life cycle of people's participation, in addition to the wildly creative things you've said. My colleague Stephen Skripik has joined us because there are questions that are coming in.
You did warn me that once Stephen arrived, it's like, Kwame, shut up. There are questions. Bring everybody else.
Yeah.
So I'm welcome, Stephen.
Yeah.
You've made them pour in, Kwame. So we're going to try and get as many of these as possible. I wish we could rewind to the top of the hour and get more time again. Kwame, how do we keep teams psyched up, or at least positive, when shows are being regularly cancelled and rescheduled? This is a theme week after week, and I think you can inspire us here.
Well, I don't know if I can inspire, but what I can do is certainly empathize. I have been on those calls where we've had to stand down shows and artists and the work after years of work. And it is really hard. And so I will separate that between the external freelance community and the building. And I think that the way that we attempt to keep the building and the people in the building engaged and inspired is constant communication, by transparency, and by trying to share vision. And that vision sometimes is, I don't know what tomorrow looks like. Or it's sometimes, here's what I'm thinking, I don't know that I can do it. And other times, here's what I've done after listening to you and thinking about it. So I think that's the way we're attempting to do that with our staff and our colleagues in the building. With the freelance community, it's harder. They have been hit so hard by this. Incomes cut, not knowing when they're going to get back in, getting calls from theaters on a daily basis saying, I'm afraid we can't move your project forward anymore due to, and I think the only way that I have attempted to do that is, again, to be as open as I can be with, for instance, I send to our freelance community, I send press clippings of the sector so that they get to hear what's happening on a weekly basis. Actually, I didn't do last week because we got slightly lost in it, by trying to find ways to employ freelancers, even though we are semi-dark. And I'm calling us semi-dark because a theater is never truly dark, because there's always thought and activity happening within that building. And I think by encouraging conversations or being part of conversations with the freelance community to talk about how we are going to build back better.
Thank you. Thank you to Stephen for that question. Another question here from Ben. You know, Kwame, we've got an international audience here today. And Ben asks, can you make comparative observations about the ways in which each country is better positioned to meet the challenges at the moment, and the ways in which each country is less positioned to meet the challenges, knowing your time at Center Stage in Baltimore?
I'm going to attempt to do that. It doesn't mean I'll be successful. I learned so much from Baltimore, but I also learned a great deal with the many works that I did at the Public Theatre in New York. And I think that what's really interesting is that I never did Shakespeare when I was in Britain. I learned to do Shakespeare and directed Shakespeare, and in fact cared and wanted to do Shakespeare in America. And part of the reason why is because I understood that actually I saw America claim Shakespeare as their own rather legitimately. in a way that I didn't do that or felt uncomfortable here. Part of that was that I found that, that the American actor and that the American theatrical family post Joe Papp saying, let's not try and do cod accents, let's do it as Americans with our mouth. It's that there was a combination of the visceral and the intellectual that allowed Shakespeare to feel alive and contemporary and also be a Trojan horse for access. I think there is something about the American can-do attitude that positions you tremendously well to sit around the table and say, how can we do this? As opposed to what would be the problems what are the problems that will arise? And I would say part of the reason I went to America is because I found it in our culture in Britain that it was almost encouraged for us to complain, to moan, to be part of a moaning culture, or to be the people that could point out the emperor's new clothes and that somehow that would be our contribution. That's a generalization, not absolutely everyone. But I found those to be two very clear things. So I believe that the American sector is poised, and in particular because America is so well versed in race, it is poised to have a conversation about Black Lives Matter and systemic racism and how that fits into the theatrical world and how we then manifest them there in a way that I think in Britain that we may not necessarily be as well versed. Where we in Britain have an advantage, I perceive, is that actually we are used to creating and using theatre to create the state of the nation play, to investigate where we are, not just through the crucible of the family, which I've also often found in America, but anywhere. But simply, we demand of our new playwrights, we demand of them, tell me who we are, where we are, and tell me now. Mm. And that, I think, will equip us to come through this, messing with form, messing with truth, being loud and ugly, but ultimately taking our culture to church and helping us to heal.
So this dreaming big, there's an anonymous question here. How do you balance your plans for the future, these ideas, with the fiscal responsibility? And I know you have board support here, but that might not be the same everywhere, right? How do you balance that with all the fiscal responsibility required to run a theatre, particularly in this time?
I work from home, as well as home at the moment. And right at the core, I believe, of nearly every artistic director is, and nearly, not all, is that, I didn't go to business school. I don't have an MBA in business. And so fiscal responsibility is always right at the core. They've let me in, but do they know that I didn't know how to read a balance sheet until I started doing this job properly? So I don't believe that there's an artistic director who actually, nearly every idea they have, they run through the filter of how can I pay for this? How can I get this past my executive director, even though I'm the CEO? How do I get it past the board? And so I think actually that nearly every idea, and America, you're placed really well for this. Philanthropy is a gut reaction to you. It's a reflex. It's not here. And so, and I've always said this, I say this here at the Young Vic, I say, if the idea is big enough, you'll find the money. Hmm. And so it's not always believing that my budget, as currently configured, will be able to afford this idea. But I have a wonderful partner who says, I like that idea, now let's go out and find the money to do it.
If I may, Jill, one more question. Yeah. What would you say to all the young people considering a future in the performing arts or creative sector now, or how organizations would support them? I would add on to that. How do you find your voice in a sector that is shrinking financially and is tightly financed and immensely difficult to break into? What can and should young people do? And I would extend that to say, what should our leaders in our organizations be doing too?
I think that's a really, really, really hard question. And as you can tell, I'm pausing because it is a very, not only is it hard, but it's profound. Because, when you get to my age, really, it's less about what's being added to your CV. It's that we're in the legacy business. That's where our ego is. How do we create a world that is better for the next gen? And it is bloody hard right now. Okay, I'd say this. I'd say only do this if you must, if you have to. Don't do this because you want to. Don't do it because it's fun. Don't do it but do it because to do anything else would be to reduce the size of your soul and your spirit. Number two, I would say, if you're an actor, for instance, there are 1,000 reasons why you don't get a job. Just don't let your acting be one of them. I would say that know that your job is to tell me where I'm going when I'm doing well and when I'm not creating enough opportunities for you. It's to understand that we are on the inside only because you are on the outside, and that we want to bring you onto the inside. It's a little bit like every actor walks into an audition, and sometimes you walk in thinking, oh my God, I really want this job, without knowing that every producer and director on the other side wants you to be the one, because I can get home quicker and I know that my project can work now that I've seen you. Understand that you walk in that power. The second thing is, well, that's the second. The 15th thing is make sure that you are a slash artist. To be multidisciplinary or anti-disciplinary is not a sin anymore. It is a prerequisite to be an artist. Mm. And I don't just mean do your day job. Are you working in a cafeteria? I mean, when you want to make a podcast, make a podcast. When you want to be an actor, be an actor. When you want to make a film, go write that film script. When you want to think about an AR or an XR experience, go investigate and go do it. Make yourself the best that you can be in that, and know that you are going to have 3 or 4 bows to your string to survive. Whereas the previous generation only had to have 1. You're going to need 4. It's unfortunate, but it is the way of the world. That would be my gut response to that rather profound and slightly painful question.
And to that, about the executive leader, Stephen, I'd add all of that ferocity that you just heard. As executive leaders, as chief execs, we need in those posts too. That courage, that ferocious courage you just heard Kwame describe, is required in that kind of leadership too. Kwame, hang with us for a minute. I want to share a couple of things that are coming up in TRG 30 soon. Invitation for you to join us next week. I'm being joined by Dr. Tony Byers, who's the author of The Multiplier Effect of Inclusion. We will be talking about diversity as fuel for recovery. And in upcoming weeks, we'll be talking about examples that are live from the stages, where stages are being activated now, frameworks about with whom will we gather, and also Joe Hodge, who's the artistic director and chief exec at the Guthrie Theater here in America, will be joining me in several weeks. My second invitation to you is to join us in our cohort of now more than 500 performing arts organizations and cultural institutions globally who are sharing data so that we can understand our own experiences and our own patron experiences in the context of our nations, our cohorts, genre-wise, and our own history. Just released is philanthropic data, and you can sign up at trgartsresiliency.com, our microsite for now. And finally, before we go and say goodbye to Kwame, I'm just going to invite you to say a final word, Kwame. Please give us feedback, including on your host's ability to navigate technology today. trgartsresiliency.com is a place where we have new tools and services always being added to help ensure that you're getting what you need. And by giving us feedback about TRG 30, we'll be talking about the things that you want to be hearing about today. Listen, Kwame, I couldn't thank you enough for joining us. It was inspirational. Send us out with something that will just keep people tethered to the why this week.
I don't know that I can achieve that, but what I will say, apart from thank you so much, is that civilizations are judged by culture. Mm. If we think back, and I say Egypt, you start thinking about what architecture. If I think Greece, you think about words and philosophies. Wherever you go, cultures are judged by it. We are the cultural warriors. We are the people by which our time will be judged and remembered by. Stay strong, stay resilient. Know that this too will pass. And when we come through this portal, we will build back better.
Amen. And thank you everyone for joining us today. Kwame, thank you. And we'll see you next week. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.